Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, we shall be looking at the state of the Jamaican economy. Is Jamaica going through a recession, or is a recession on its way? That is the question that we need to pose, that we need to ask ourselves. Now, this is a letter that was written to the Gleaner. That's an letter to the editor, State of Jamaican Economy. That's the title of the article. It says, recently opposition spokesman on citizen security and productivity, Peter Bunting, stated that the Jamaican economy is headed for a technical recession, and he is on point. So the writer here is agreeing with this spokesman on citizen security. I don't know, I didn't know about this title. When did they create this title, Citizen Security and Productivity? Peter Bunting has that position. That's weird, right? That they're creating all these positions in spite of the fact that Jamaica is going through a rough time. I've never heard of that position. Have you? Citizen Security and Productivity. And that is a position held by the opposition leader, not leader, but the opposition member of the opposition or opposition spokesman, Peter Bunting. The Jamaican economy declined by some 3.5% in the September quarter of 2024 and has now declined for another fiscal quarter ending December 2024. Now, I thought that Nigel Clark, this distinguished member that is now at the International Monetary Fund, had said that he had done a fantastic job, and that the Jamaican economy was off now to a great start because he had laid the proper foundation. But it seems to me that that might not be the case. What specific measures is the government putting in place to mitigate further economic contraction and to increase overall productivity? That's the question being asked. And he has another question, or a series of other questions. Where are the appropriate fiscal and economic policies to structurally drive and push economic growth and expansion? Where are the policies to facilitate widespread inflows of foreign direct investment to allow for good paying jobs? That's not going to happen. We see that in the United States, where the United States is not even willing to increase the minimum wage for its citizens. So how do we think we're going to have foreign direct investment that is going to pay us very well? It's not going to happen. These are pie in the sky dreams, right? And goals that we think we are going to have. Bunting said, since the initial COVID recovery, the economy slowed for the following 8 or 9 quarters, stalled in the quarter ending June 2024, and declined by 3.5% in the September quarter. He added that the hotel and restaurant sector declined 6.2% as a result of a fall off in stopover arrivals. At the same time, net room yields are down. So that's not good. It seems to me that the economy has not been growing for some quarters, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic. Clearly, the required economic and fiscal policies are not in place, which would widely accommodate sustained yearly economic growth and expansion of 6 to 10%. That sentence, there's something that is wrong with that sentence, but I understand what you're saying. The manufacturing and agricultural sectors need immense expansion, and clearly interest rates will have to be reduced from their current high levels. Jamaica should be able to feed itself, which we are not feeding ourselves. And he's questioning why RADA and the purpose of RADA, why are they not, increasing their sort of responsibility in helping Jamaica to feed itself. We should be self-sufficient as far as food is concerned, but we are not. Listen to what the writer is saying. Over 70% of mutton and pig meat is being imported into Jamaica, right? 70% of mutton and pig meat that we could rear there in Jamaica are imported into the country. So it means, therefore, that we are far from being self-sufficient and self-reliant as far as feeding ourselves, as far as food is concerned in a tropical climate where you have these animals roaming around. Now, this speaks to the low-performing agricultural sector, which has rarely been ignored by past and present government administrations, because that is what it's all about, globalization, and that is what the Democratic Party supported. They think that we should live in a globalized economy where the World Trade Organization is the one that runs the show, and what we have is this very this palpable inequities between the what so-called first world countries and third world countries, where they just dump their stuff into third world countries. The first world countries dump their stuff, their goods and their foods, whatever, their services into third world countries, and we have to accept them. Jamaica should be earning from the agricultural sector the same level of foreign exchange earnings like tourism industry. It's not going to happen, because remember now that the subsidies offered by these so-called first world countries, Jamaicans are not allowed to do so. The IMF, for example, would be totally against Jamaicans subsidizing their food industry, the agricultural sector. They would be totally against that, because the IMF purpose is not for Jamaica to become independent and be self-reliant. It is for them to be dependent on these so-called first world and developed countries. Unemployment is low, but the majority, and listen to what he's saying here, because some of you, when we say unemployment is low, you are not understanding how they are calculating the low unemployment rate. You are just running with it, right? You are just running with the propaganda, because that is what you do. You don't love to think. Unemployment is low, but the majority of people who are gainfully employed are in low-paying jobs. I concur with Senator Bunting that the JLP-led administration is operating a plantation-style economy. But they also, the PNP, when they were in position, that's what they did. And that is what they engineered in 1990 with the FinSAC debacle. And I don't want anybody to come and tell me, oh, you're talking about the economy and the poor state of the economy. What would the PNP have done? The point of the videos that I've been publishing is to show you that both of them are the same. They are the same, but you are not taking the time out to neither think nor reflect on what you are asking or on what you are suggesting and saying. So we have here that they're suggesting the PNP on the Mr. Bunting is suggesting, whatever he's called, is suggesting that the current PNP government is operating a plantation-style economy, which benefits just a few, while the majority of the Jamaican people are suffering in many ways. And what is new? ¿Qué hay de nuevo, as they would say in Spanish? What is new? There's nothing new under the sun as far as that is concerned, because that is how the Jamaican situation has been during slavery, during the colonial times, and it has been transferred to our current moments. I wonder what that helicopter is coming over now. Many Jamaicans are employed on contracts, and in some cases with no security of tenure and no benefits after they leave those jobs or retire from them. The health sector is in shambles. The current economic and fiscal policies are flawed and will not allow for tangible economic growth and expansion. Now, what does the University of the West Indies, what are they saying about these policies? Government corruption and the high crime rate is costing this country to lose close to 150 billion per year, right? So Robert Daly, who is the author of this article, is suggesting here, has made this critical point that the country loses close to 150 billion Jamaica per year due to the crime rate. Due to the high crime rate, we lose 150. And, I would say, Robert Daly, that I don't think perhaps Jamaica is losing it. Well, certainly not the elites and the government. Because crime pays, that money, those sums of money, the 150 billion Jamaican dollars that you say that we're losing, yes, the taxpayers are losing that, but the Jamaican government, in terms of the powers that be and the financial elites that control them, they are pocketing this money. And that is what we have to understand. So crime is profitable. It's a lucrative industry, and I told you that before. So yes, the Jamaican taxpayers, the majority of people are losing, but we must contextualize when we say lose. And, in many cases, I used to say the same thing, but you have to think. As you grow older, you must get wiser and begin to think more critically. Now, the $150 billion Robert Daly, of which you referenced, is definitely going into the pockets of the Jamaican elites and some select members of the Jamaican government on both sides of the political aisle. Jamaica's economy is in need of policies which will drive growth. I don't think it's going to happen. And if the policies that drive growth is going to be growth for a few people, right? Now, in the political newspaper last week, I came across an article because sometimes I go to see what they're saying. Not that I believe what these left-wing sources are saying, but sometimes one of the times they might just decide to put in an article that is unveiling some truth. And the question, the writer of this article here in the political magazine, voters were right about the economy. The data was wrong. And people are asking me, what does the data say? Where is your data? Data according to whom? The data according to whom? Not because you get something from a government data means that it is, and it's coming from Harvard University, it's coming from University of the West Indies. Does it mean that it is correct or it is law? It's the Bible. Here's why unemployment is higher, wages are lower, and growth less robust than government statistics suggest. And this is coming from the political newspaper. That is a democratic-leaning newspaper, right? No, and now that Trump is in office, this is what the paper is suggesting here. And let me just share it with you, just for you to see that I am not just reading from thin air, and it's a made-up thing that I am telling you, right? This is coming from the political newspaper, the magazine. Voters were right about the economy. The data was wrong. Here's why unemployment is higher, wages are lower, and growth less robust than government statistics suggest, right? And look at the people here and the prices. This is in the United States, right? Now, before the presidential election, many Democrats were puzzled by the seeming disconnect between economic reality as reflected in various government statistics and the public's perceptions of the economy on the ground. A lot of times it is the perception, and the government is not necessarily siding with the average Joe on the ground. And that is what you've got to put into your cranium, and you have not yet done so. Many in Washington bristled at the public's failure to register how strong the economy really was. They charged that the right-wing echo chambers were conning voters into believing entirely preposterous narratives about America's decline. So what they do, they divide you into two camps, right-wing and left-wing. Trump and Biden, or Kamala Harris, Andrew Holdes and Mark Golding. And then they divide you and you fight, among the groups, and you suggest that my side is the right side and the others say that my side is the right side and your side is the bad side and our side is, doing greater in terms of improving the lives of citizens, when that is not true. But their purpose is to divide and to conquer. And that is what they're doing with your little minds. What they rarely considered was whether something else might be responsible for the disconnect, whether, for instance, government statistics were fundamentally flawed. What if the numbers supporting the case for broad-based prosperity were themselves misrepresentations? What if, in fact, darker assessments of the economy were more authentically tethered to reality? Right? And that is just the case. The latter is the case, that the assessments of the economy were more authentically tethered to reality, the darker assessments, not the glowing assessments that you have been getting from the JLP, that the economic fundamentals are great. The same thing applies to the Jamaican economy, which is tied also to the American economy. And we're waiting on their foreign direct investments, right? To come to Jamaica and to give us jobs to the slaves down there, waiting for Americans to, and Americans can't even provide jobs for their own people. Okay. On some level, I relate to the underlying frustrations. Having served as comptroller of the currency during the 1990s, I've spent substantial chunks of my career exploring the gaps between public perception and economic reality, particularly in the realm of finance. Many of the officials I've befriended and advised over the last quarter century, members of the Federal Reserve, those running regulatory agencies, many leaders in Congress, have told me they consider it their responsibility to set public opinion aside and deal with the economy as it exists by the hard numbers. So what he's suggesting here is that the politicians prefer to look at dead data, at dead numbers that do not have anything to do with anything to do with the reality, that are untethered from the real reality, from what is on the ground. And they will tell you these things and say the economy has grown exponentially, and look at the data, and this, we have lifted so, many people out of poverty and all of that stuff, right? And in some cases, very, very rare occasions, on very rare occasions, sometimes it might be true. Some of it is true. Not all of it is always true, but some of it might be true. And you believe that it stands for everything, and you just sing it. As you sing new every morning is thy love, right? In recent years, however, as my focus has broadened, right? And this is as my focus has broadened, and what I have been saying to you, that you have to broaden your horizons and your understanding to think, because many of you can't think. You're just able to give back stories and narratives like the Dion Jackson Millers. They just come and they tell you a story. And you really wonder how Dion Jackson Miller got her law degree, and these people, how did they get a law degree? Did they even have to analyze anything? So in recent years, however, as my focus has broadened beyond finance to the economy as a whole, the disconnect between hard government numbers and popular perception has spurred me to question that faith. Because it's a faith, it's a religion. I've had the benefit of living in two realms that seem rarely to intersect. One as a Washington insider, the other as an advisor to lenders and investors across the country. Toggling between two had led me to be increasingly skeptical that the government's measurements properly capture the realities defining unemployment, wage growth, and the strength of the economy as a whole. This is not coming from what you tout as a conspiracy newspaper. This newspaper is not a right-wing newspaper. This newspaper was specifically designed to support the Democratic Party, which many Jamaicans are tethered to, which the Gleaner is proud of associating themselves with, right? So these numbers have time and time again suggested to many in Washington that unemployment is low, right? That wages are growing for middle America, and that to a greater or lesser degree, economic growth is lifting all boats year upon year. But when traveling the country, because you have to do your research and to do your own thinking, I've encountered something very different, he's suggesting here. Cities that appeared increasingly seedy, regions that seemed derelict. Driving into the office each day in Washington, I noted a homeless encampment fixed outside the Federal Reserve itself. Even Trump is calling the Washington, D.C. area a decayed town, a decayed city, and he wants to rebuild it. Some of what Trump is saying is true. The way in which he's going to go about it, there might be flaws to that, but a lot of what he's saying is true. I noted a homeless encampment fixed outside the Federal Reserve itself, and then I began to detect a second pattern inside and outside DC alike. Democrats on the whole seemed much more inclined to believe what the economic indicators reported. So the people who tethered themselves to the Democratic Party, everything the Democratic Party tells them they believe. right? We have a medication. Take it. You jump. Yes. How much do you need? How much dosage should I take? Without any ability to think. Republicans, by contrast, seemed more inclined to believe what they were seeing with their own two eyes, which suggests that the Republicans tend to be more tethered to reality. They're flawed people, just like the Democrats, but at least they are able to be tethered to the reality, right? And one would have thought that the Democrats, for the most part, are the ones who went to university. That's what they were saying, that the Democrats are the middle class, Americans who have gone to university and they've studied, and they're professionals, right? They're pharmacists and they're doctors and they're lawyers and they're teachers and nurses, and people think they're bright, right? But I have taught at the university level in the United States, and I can tell you that it's a show. Everything there is also performative. Everything in the United States is also performative. It's not real. It's on an artificial culture as well. And we follow it because Western culture is really artificial, I think we know that, right? Within the nation's capital, this gap in perception has had profound implications. For decades, a small cohort of federal agencies have reported many of the same economic statistics, using fundamentally the same methodology or relying on the same sources. It's the same thing they do. They just punch in some numbers. And that is what Dr. Nigel Clark was doing. He wasn't doing anything fantastic. Doesn't have any great mind as you think he was, and he was a top of an economy that he was trying to build. Nigel Clark was simply just putting in numbers into a software, and as he got the numbers using the same methodology and the same sources, he just spits out what he gets from that software, and you believe it. And these softwares are so sophisticated that they can produce graphs. I used to do research with some of these softwares, and they produce these graphs for you that you're saying, wow, this is just a farce. It's farcical, right? Nothing real about what it's doing, but you believe it because nothing in this world now has to be real. Now, at the same appointed times, now rarely has anyone ever asked whether the figures they release hew to reality. I've always asked that, right? But I'm sure he's suggesting the people who work in those government agencies. I couldn't, because I would challenge them, right? I would challenge them that these are not numbers that work. They're not true. Given my newfound skepticism, I decided several years ago to gather a team of researchers under the rubric of the Ludwig Institute for Shared Economic Prosperity to delve deeply into some of the most frequently cited headline statistics. Listen to what he's saying. What we uncovered shocked us. The bottom line is that for 20 years or more, including the months prior to the election, voter perception was more reflective of reality than the incumbent statistics. And the incumbent means the government that is in power, because the government in power wants to win. So he is going to make up statistics for you and you're going to believe him. Our research revealed that the data collected by the various agencies is largely accurate. Moreover, the people staffing those agencies are talented and well-intentioned, right? So we can't say all of them are not well-intentioned, but the powers that be are going to distort the messages given by them. But the filters used to compute the headline statistics are flawed, right? As a result, they paint a much rosier picture of reality than bears out on the ground. Take as a particularly egregious example what is perhaps the most widely reported economic indicator, unemployment. And I want you to listen to this. This is what is happening in Jamaica. The same methodology they use in the United States, that's the same methodology that they use in Jamaica also, because it's the same neoliberal, philosophy. Known to experts as the U3, The number misleads in several ways. First, it counts as employed the millions of people who are unwillingly underemployed. And in Jamaica, we have a lot of underemployed people who don't have the skills and the education. That is people who, for example, work only a few hours each week while searching for a full-time job. Second, it does not take into account many Americans who have been so discouraged that they're no longer trying to find a job, right? And that happens in Jamaica too. Finally, the prevailing statistics does not account for the meagerness of any individual's income. Thus, you could be homeless on the streets, making an intermittent income and functionally incapable of keeping your family fed. And the government would still count you as employed. The government would still count you as employed. This is the sort of crudity often displayed by your government. I don't believe those who went into this past election taking pride in the unemployment numbers understood that the near record low unemployment figures, the figures were 4.2% in November. So they were saying on the Democrats, the unemployment rate was 4.2. And Andrew Holness is suggesting the same thing. In fact, Andrew Holness has boldly said that Jamaica is on the verge of full employment. That is what your prime minister, I don't sometimes understand what is in his head. Right? I do not understand what is sometimes in the head of the prime minister. Counted homeless people doing occasional work as employed. But the implications are powerful. If you filter the statistic to include as unemployed people who can't find anything but part-time work or who make poverty wage, roughly $25,000 a year, which in the United States, that's no money. The percentage is actually 23.7%. So what he's suggesting here, when they were telling us that in November, before the election, before the United States election, that unemployment rate was 4.2, it's when you take the real data into awareness, into reality, when you factor that into the real economy, then you see that it's 23%, 23.7% of Americans who were unemployed. Wow. In other words, nearly 1 of every 4 workers is functionally unemployed in America today. Hardly something to celebrate. But you have to vote for Kamala. Because Kamala painted this picture and you're in your nice job now and you think it's going to last forever. You think it's going to last forever. Okay? And that is what is happening. The picture is similarly misleading when examining the methodology used to track how much Americans are earning. The prevailing government indicator, known colloquially as weekly earnings, tracks full-time wages to the exclusion of both the unemployed and those engaged in typically lower-paid part-time work. Today, as a result, those keeping track are led to believe that the median wage in the US stands at roughly $61,900. But if you track everyone in the workforce, that is, if you include part-time workers and unemployed job seekers, the results are remarkably different. Our research reveals that the median wage is actually little more than $52,300 per year. Think of that. American workers on the median are making 16% less than the prevailing statistics would indicate. Yeah, I just wanted to bring this to your awareness to let you know that oftentimes what your government says and the perception and the reality on the ground are distinct. And whom do we believe? Who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe what the government say, lying to you barefacedly? Or are you going to think for yourselves? Are you going to look at your family? Are you going to look at what is happening to your brothers and sisters on the ground? Or are you just happy with a little cozy job that you have at the moment that might go tomorrow and say, well, I believe I'm going to vote for Kamala. I'm going to vote for Andrew Holness because they are the best candidates since sliced bread. And they're going to improve the economy. They have done well with the economy. They have followed the neoliberal agenda to their best. And what else? There's no option. you may say, to this neoliberal agenda or philosophy? There's none. You love slavery. You love to be enslaved. You love for your minds to remain enslaved. And you believe the government. You believe everything John Jackson Miller tells you. She just gives you a narrative and you believe, what is she saying? What is John Jackson Miller saying? What is Cliff Hughes saying? Cliff Hughes is on program saying that this government, the JLP government, is the best government that he has seen since independent Jamaica. And he says he dares anyone to challenge him on that, on his statement, on his assertion. He dares anyone to challenge him. Right? And you really wonder what is Cliff Hughes reading, but the Jamaican Gleaner and the Observer. What is he reading? What is in Cliff Hughes' library? Or is he just lying? Right? These are the questions we have to ask. We have to ask the hard questions. And I don't think Jamaicans are ready for the hard questions. I don't think we have the intellectual acuity for the hard questions. Right? Because all you want to do is to hear some sensationalized title. Oh, yes, and you talk all sort of nonsense. Right? You talk all sort of nonsense. At the end of the day, our economy is sinking. And very soon, the high levels of crime will get to your home. And people are going to come there and forcefully steal everything that you have because they can't survive. And there's nothing the government that is doing to help them. So when people are desperate, they do desperate things. We've got to wake up. We've got to now smell the coffee. We've got to ask the hard questions. I hope that you will, because if you don't, then you are going to suffer, and you can't blame anyone but yourself. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. See you in another video. Adios.